The first sound at my father's funeral wasn't crying. Asterisk, it wasn't prayer. Asterisk, it was laughter, not nervous laughter, not disbelief. Asterisk, a slow, deliberate chuckle rolled through the cathedral speakers, deep and dry, like someone enjoying a private joke at the worst possible moment. Asterisk, the sound didn't just echo. It settled. It pressed into people's chests. It crawled up their spines. Every head turned toward the coffin at the exact same time, like they were pulled by a string. A woman near the aisle gasped and covered her mouth. Someone behind me whispered, "Oh my God." A few men actually stepped back, instinctively, as if death itself had shifted. Asterisk, I didn't move. I didn't need to, because I knew. Asterisk, we were standing inside one of the largest cathedrals in Chicago. Stone pillars rose like judges. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting red and gold shadows on the floor, like the building itself was bleeding. This place had been chosen carefully, not for God, but for optics. Asterisk, the room was filled with people who ran ports, railways, fleets, and supply chains across continents. Men who could choke a country's economy with a single decision. They weren't here just to mourn my father. They were here to witness succession. And Samantha understood that better than anyone. Asterisk, she didn't wait for the priest to finish his prayer. She didn't bow her head. She didn't even look at the coffin. She stepped forward and took the microphone from the priest's hands like it was always meant to be hers. Asterisk. No apology, no hesitation, no respect. Asterisk, her heels clicked against the marble floor, sharp, confident sounds that cut through the grief like knives. Her diamonds caught the light as she turned to face the room, her posture perfect, her smile practiced. This wasn't grief. This was a launch. Asterisk, my husband, Zachary, she said smoothly, will be assuming the role of CEO effective immediately. She paused, not for mourning, not for reflection, for applause. Asterisk, she scanned the room, waiting for approval, waiting for the crown to settle onto her head. Zachary stood beside her, chin raised, hands clasped in front of him, already wearing power like a tailored suit. Asterisk, that's when my father laughed again. Louder this time. The sound cracked, something opened. Asterisk, Zachary stiffened. I saw it, the way his shoulders locked, the way his jaw clenched just a fraction too late.
His face drained of color, as if his body understood the danger before his mind did. Asterisk, because deep down,
buried under entitlement and arrogance, Zachary knew one thing. Asterisk, my father never laughed unless someone was about to lose something. This wasn't supernatural. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. To understand why my father was laughing from the grave, you have to understand the decade that led up to this moment. You have to understand what this empire actually ran on. Not titles, not speeches, asterisk, not last names. It ran on exhaustion. While Zachary traveled first class to conferences and luxury retreats, I stood in frozen rail yards at 3 a.m, my boots soaked through, breath visible in the air, negotiating with union leaders so supply lines wouldn't collapse. While he smiled for cameras and talked about vision, I stayed up for 48 hours straight fixing systems no one was supposed to see fail. Asterisk, I became invisible by design. Asterisk, because I learned early that in this industry, a woman who raises her voice is emotional. Asterisk, but a woman who fixes disasters quietly is useful. So I stayed quiet. I missed my best friend's wedding because a shipment of medical equipment was stuck in customs overseas. I spent my 25th birthday alone in a server room, rebooting tracking systems after a cyber attack while the city celebrated outside. I slept in airports, ate cold food, and learned how to solve problems without witnesses. I told myself this was integrity. I told myself competence would protect me. I told myself that merit mattered. What I didn't understand then was this. Silence doesn't earn respect. Silence gives permission. Permission to ignore you. Permission to steal credit. Asterisk, permission to treat your work like air essential. Invisible, free. Asterisk, 3 days earlier, while my father's body was still warm. That permission was fully abused. Asterisk, Zachary and Samantha walked into corporate headquarters like they owned the building already.
he wasn't wearing black.
He was wearing navy news, sharp, expensive. The kind of suit you wear when you want people to know you've arrived. Asterisk, he ran his hand along my father's desk and frowned. This has to go, he said casually. Too old, too rustic. Asterisk, Samantha didn't even look up from her phone. We should gut this entire floor. Glass walls, private lounge, wet bar. It smells like diesel and old men. Asterisk, Peter stood up then. My father's chief of staff for 40 years. The man who had helped build this company from nothing. His voice shook as he tried to talk about stock stability, about drivers worried about their pensions, about partners calling nonstop. Asterisk, Zachary laughed, not nervously, not awkwardly. He laughed with confidence. Relax, Peter, he said. You won't be here long anyway. We need fresh blood. Then he turned to me. He took urgent shipping manifests from my hands and dropped them onto the floor, one by one, like trash. You're good at boring things, Jessica, he said. Paperwork, scheduling, keeping the lights on. Stay in your lane. I didn't argue. I bent down and picked up the papers. I stacked them neatly. My hands were steady. That's when I looked at Peter, and Peter looked back at me. No words, just recognition. That was the moment the plan was born. Back in the cathedral, the massive screen flickered to life. My father sat at his desk, staring straight into the camera. He didn't look kind. He didn't look tired. He looked exactly the way he did before firing someone who thought they were untouchable. Asterisk, Zachary. His voice echoed through the stone walls, calm and precise. You thought my generosity was love. It wasn't. It was a test. The screen changed. A ledger appeared. Asterisk, rows and rows of red numbers. Dates. Amounts. Failures carefully.
Cataloged. Nightclubs. Cars. Consultants. Collapsed ventures. Millions burned. I gave you unlimited resources.
My father continued. To see if you would build something. Or destroy it. Samantha stopped smiling. Zachary leaned forward, his eyes darting, his breathing shallow. Then my father said the words that ended everything. Those weren't gifts. They were loans. Asterisk, the screen switched to a legal document. Crisp. Official. Signed in confident ink. Zachary's signature. Every dollar he wasted had been deducted from his inheritance. Asterisk, and when his debt crossed $6 million. I paid it. The screen displayed the bank transfer. Sender, Jessica Vance. Amount, $6,200,000. You didn't inherit this company. My father said softly. You sold it, and your sister bought it. The silence that followed wasn't shock. It was annihilation. Asterisk, Jessica, my father said, his voice warm for the first time. The keys are in the safe. Fire him. The screen went black. Zachary stumbled toward me, sweating, shaking, stripped of confidence. We're family, he whispered desperately. Like the word might save him. I handed him the envelope. Termination papers. Asterisk, effective immediately. Asterisk, as I walked out of the cathedral. The weight on my chest lifted for the first time in 10 years. The air felt cleaner. The sunlight felt earned. This wasn't revenge fueled by anger. This was correction. Asterisk, and that night, I slept without fear. Asterisk, because the empire was finally in the hands of the person who had already been carrying it. It had been 3 days since my father passed, and the world seemed to expect me to collapse under the weight of grief. I did not. I could not. There was work to be done, and grief, as painful as it was, did not change the fact that every single moment of inaction could cost the empire everything my father had built. The morning had begun with the cold realization that Zachary and Samantha had no intention of mourning. While the rest of the family scattered in private grief or whispered condolences to board members, they were in their own world. They were already planning the next 60 years as if a dead man's empire belonged entirely to them. I arrived at corporate headquarters before the sun had fully risen. The building, once a place of structure and respect under my father's guidance, now smelled faintly of entitlement and arrogance. The scent of new money, expensive cologne, and overconfidence lingered in the air. I walked past the polished floors, past the walls lined with photographs of milestones and triumphs that I alone had helped make possible. and felt the familiar cold edge of control settling over me. Peter was already there. His presence was a quiet anchor in the chaos, a reminder of everything that was steady, reliable, and intelligent in the company. He didn't speak at first. He just handed me the morning reports, his eyes asking silently if I was ready. I nodded. I was ready. I had been ready for a long time. Then the elevator doors opened. Zachary and Samantha arrived like conquerors entering a conquered city. Zachary walked in first, head high, shoulders back, the type of posture you practice in mirrors, until arrogance becomes natural. Samantha followed, typing away on her phone, her face devoid of any grief, only calculation. Zachary's first words were not a greeting, not a question about the team, not even acknowledgement of the tragedy that had occurred. This desk has to go, he said, running his hand along my father's oak masterpiece. It's too old, too rustic. I want glass, chrome, something visionary. Samantha tapped on her phone without looking up. We should gut the whole floor, she said. Private lounge, wet bar, maybe a helipad. Zachary deserves an entrance that shows he is the future. Peter, stoic and pale, tried to intervene. Sir, there are liquidity concerns. We have employees worried about their pensions. You can't. Just ... Relax, Peter, Zachary interrupted, a smirk curling on his lips. You won't be here long anyway. Fresh blood is required. Consider this your notice. Then he turned to me. I was holding urgent shipping manifests that needed immediate attention. Zachary plucked them from my hands and threw them onto the floor. And you, Jessica, he sneered. We need someone with charisma, someone who is a face, not a worker. You're good at the boring stuff. Filing, coffee, lights on. That's your job. I didn't respond. I bent down slowly, picked up the papers, stacked them neatly, and met Peter's eyes. The silent understanding passed between us. The moment had arrived. The empire, as Zachary saw it, could be dismantled with a wave of arrogance. But that arrogance would be his undoing. For 10 years I had been the ghost in this machine. Invisible. Unnoticed, but indispensable. I had rebuilt systems after cyber attacks, resolved international logistics crises while the visible heirs of the empire chased glamour, and negotiated contracts that kept the company solvent. I had sacrificed birthdays, weddings, personal comfort, and family relationships, all for the stability and prosperity of the empire my father had built. I had thought loyalty and competence would be enough to earn recognition. I was wrong. Silence, patience, and diligence had been mistaken for weakness. My labor had been treated as a resource to exploit. My presence, as quiet as it had been, was overlooked. But I had been keeping score. Every slight, every usurped credit, every condescending remark had been meticulously logged. And now the time to act had come. Zachary thought he was untouchable because he had been the firstborn. He thought that blood alone gave him a license to claim the throne. He was arrogant enough to believe that inheritance was synonymous with leadership. He was wrong. Leadership is earned. And I had been earning it quietly, in the shadows where he could not see. Samantha, ever the opportunist, thought she was orchestrating her own rise. She whispered about interiors, colors, designs, lounges. She believed she was building an empire for herself and her husband. She did not see that she had walked straight into a storm that had been silently gathering for years. Peter and I moved like shadows around their chaos. Each piece of paper I picked up, each ledger I verified, each call I made to stabilize shipments and reassure partners was part of a broader plan. This was not retaliation born of anger. This was calculated, precise, and inevitable. I remembered my father's words from years ago, whispered in a rare moment of quiet between board meetings and crisis calls: competence without recognition is wasted if you allow others to define your worth. I had lived by those words. I had mastered the art of invisibility. And now invisibility was about to become an advantage. Zachary had spent the past 10 years waiting for my father's death to secure his position. He had assumed the empire was his by default. He had assumed I would remain in the shadows, invisible and compliant. He had assumed that the empire, like our family, was his to bend, reshape, and consume as he pleased. He was about to learn that the foundation he had relied upon was not what he thought. Peter and I had spent the previous night reviewing documents, contracts, and the financial ledger of every venture Zachary had touched. Every failed investment, every squandered fund, every moment of incompetence had been meticulously documented. Every dollar spent beyond limits had been logged. Every action that revealed greed, arrogance, or short-sightedness was tracked. We knew his weaknesses better than he did. The plan was simple. Let him believe he had the crown. Let him believe he had power. Let him revel in the illusion of authority. Then, in a controlled, deliberate strike, reveal the truth. This was not a moment of anger. This was a demonstration of order, of inevitability. The empire would remain intact, not because of inheritance, not because of appearances, but because competence had been ready all along. I watched them for a long moment. Zachary and Samantha, moving through the office like it belonged to them. Every gesture, every smirk, every flick of the wrist screamed entitlement. They believed the empire was theirs simply because my father had left it behind. They did not understand that an empire is not owned by a name. It is owned by the people who run it, who understand it, who have sweat and sacrifice etched into every decision. For years I had been the invisible force behind every success. I had been the one who negotiated contracts in Berlin while Zachary posed at charity galas in Paris. I had been the one who recalibrated the distribution system after a cyber attack at midnight in Rotterdam while my brother slept soundly in a luxury suite. I had been the ghost in the machine, fixing problems before anyone else knew they existed, and they had mocked me for it. Samantha had whispered behind my back at events that I was just a shadow. Zachary had smirked at family dinners, referring to me as the worker while taking credit for initiatives I had personally overseen. Every slight, every stolen idea, every humiliation had been logged. Every insult and condescending remark had been stored in a ledger far more precise than any of their financial accounts. Peter knew. He had watched it all too. He had seen me sacrificed on the altar of their arrogance, and he had kept silent only until the timing was perfect. And now the timing was perfect. I began walking through the office, past mahogany desks and glass walls, past the polished floors that reflected their arrogance. Zachary noticed my movement and turned, expecting fear, submission, maybe even groveling. He would get none of it. Samantha stopped tapping her phone and looked at me, her lips curling into a confused frown. She did not recognize the calm that had settled over me, the deliberate precision in my every movement. She had mistaken my silence for weakness, my quiet diligence for compliance. She had made a fatal error. I stopped at the center of the floor, the stack of documents in my hand perfectly aligned. I laid them down one by one, a slow, deliberate motion that made every eye in the room follow me. Zachary's smirk faltered slightly. He did not understand why this simple act of organization caused an involuntary tension to ripple through the air. Peter gave me a subtle nod. That was the signal. I picked up the phone. I began dialing. The moment Zachary realized what I was doing, panic flashed in his eyes. He turned to Samantha, expecting reassurance, expecting complicity. But Samantha froze. She had no plan beyond her husband's arrogance. Her confidence depended entirely on Zachary's perceived power. And that confidence was crumbling. Each ring of the phone seemed to stretch time. Every click of the line, every beep, heightened the tension in the room. Zachary leaned closer, whispering, "Jessica, what are you doing? This isn't necessary, you can't." I did not respond. My focus was absolute. Years of meticulous preparation, years of silent accumulation of evidence and leverage had led to this precise moment. I did not need to argue. I did not need to yell. I did not need to prove myself. The work I had done would speak louder than any words. The first call connected. A voice on the other end confirmed the data, the transfers, the legal arrangements. Every single error Zachary had made, every mismanagement, every spent dollar beyond allowance, had been formally documented. The phone call The cathedral remained frozen, every eye locked on the unfolding spectacle. Zachary sank to the marble floor, the color drained from his face. His hands shook violently as he tried to process the documents I had placed before him. The reality was inescapable. Every misstep, every debt, every moment of reckless entitlement had been exposed in front of the world. Samantha's confidence crumbled in real time. Her face twisted in disbelief, then anger, then finally a raw, unfiltered panic. She had believed she was orchestrating her own rise, manipulating the narrative, controlling the empire. But control is an illusion when it is built on another's incompetence. She realized in a flash of clarity that the man she had married, the golden heir, the future CEO, was bankrupt in more ways than one. You lied to me, she hissed, shaking Zachary, her nails digging into his suit jacket. Her voice cracked, reverberating through the cathedral. But no one could hear her words over the weight of the truth laid bare. She had bet everything on a mirage, and now the reality was suffocating. Zachary attempted to rise, to plead, to salvage some semblance of dignity, but it was useless. The room had seen his empire crumble not from failure in the market, but from his own arrogance and mismanagement. Every financial misstep, every reckless decision, every borrowed dollar had been meticulously documented and strategically revealed. The empire had been saved not by chance, but by the invisible labor of the one he had always underestimated me. I stepped closer, calm, unyielding, the embodiment of controlled authority. I did not yell. I did not accuse. I did not indulge in theatrics. My presence alone, the quiet power I radiated, was enough to demonstrate that the reign of entitlement had ended. Zachary, I said, my voice steady and clear, this is final. Your role in this company is over. Your shares have been transferred. Your debts have been repaid. Effective immediately, you have no claim to this empire. Your tenure of arrogance and entitlement ends here. The congregation remained silent. The gravity of the moment pressing down on everyone. Board members, employees, and family alike watched as the golden child, once revered and untouchable, was reduced to a trembling man on the floor. Peter moved quietly behind me, his presence a silent reinforcement of authority. His eyes met mine for a fleeting second, and the unspoken message was clear. The empire was secure, the foundation intact. Samantha fell to her knees beside Zachary, disbelief still etched across her face. She whispered frantic questions, her voice trembling. How is this possible? I glanced at her, my expression cold but not cruel. Because competence matters. Dedication matters, loyalty matters. These are the foundations of leadership. And for 10 years I have upheld them while you two squandered the illusion of power. Zachary looked up at me, his eyes wide, searching desperately for any loophole, any mercy. Jessica, please, this is family. You can't. I shook my head. Family does not excuse incompetence. Family does not grant entitlement. You were given resources, guidance, and every opportunity to prove yourself. You failed. And now the empire has a leader who understands its true value. The envelope remained on the altar, a symbol of finality, authority, and justice. It contained the termination notice, repayment schedule, and legal transfer documents. Zachary's hands trembled as he reached toward it, but it was too late. The transition had been executed, the transfer complete, and the empire had shifted to its rightful steward. Samantha screamed, a sound of rage and disbelief, but it echoed hollowly in the cathedral. The illusion of power had been destroyed, and she could do nothing to rebuild it. Her marriage to entitlement had collapsed, and she was left exposed, powerless, and furious. I turned and walked toward the doors, the cathedral's massive interior bathed in the pale morning light. The weight of responsibility that had once felt like a burden now rested like solid ground beneath me. The empire, nurtured through years of invisible labor, painstaking attention to detail, and strategic patience, was finally secure. Peter followed silently, holding the door open as he had for my father countless times before. His eyes met mine. Once more, a flicker of pride and understanding passing between us. The chaos had ended. Order had been restored. We walked past the distribution warehouse, past the trucks lined up at the bays, past the offices where decades of labor had built an empire. For 10 years, I had felt the crushing weight of duty. Today, that weight transformed into ownership. I had earned it, not by inheritance, not by entitlement, but by mastery, diligence, an unwavering commitment. My phone buzzed with notifications. Samantha had filed for divorce. Zachary's calls went unanswered. Emails demanding explanations, threats, and excuses piled up, but they no longer mattered. The empire was safe. The future was secured. Leadership had been earned, and the reign of arrogance had ended. I sat in my father's office later that day, the sunlight streaming through the windows, highlighting the polished floors and carefully organized ledgers. Every document, every decision, every system I had built or saved was a testament to the work I had done, the sacrifices I had made, and the competence I had cultivated. I allowed myself, for the first time in years, to relax. There would be no sleepless nights worrying about mismanagement. No anxiety about the empire crumbling under the weight of incompetence. No fear that entitlement would override strategy. The company was now in the hands of someone who truly understood its value. I thought of my father, of his vision, of the quiet wisdom he had instilled in me. His trust had been validated. His empire would thrive. And for the first time, I could feel the deep satisfaction of justice, of competence triumphing over arrogance, of merit reclaiming its place. The empire was mine, not by inheritance, not by entitlement, but by work, dedication, and the steady, unwavering hand of someone who understood what leadership truly required. And as I looked out over the offices, the distribution centers, the trucks rolling down the streets, I knew with absolute certainty that it was finally safe in every sense of the word. Zachary and Samantha would remember this day forever. Not for the empire they thought they had, but for the undeniable lesson that power without competence is an illusion, that arrogance invites downfall, and that loyalty, dedication, and quiet mastery can overcome any throne built on entitlement. I closed the door behind me, leaving them to their shattered illusions, and stepped into the sunlight. The future was no longer uncertain. It was mine to shape, to protect, and to lead with precision, wisdom, and unyielding authority. And in that moment, I understood fully what my father had known all along. The empire is not about who you are by name. It is about what you do, how you protect it, and who has the courage to claim it when it matters most.